so it's just connecting to the server. Great. So recording, and I'm going to start the webinar so people can start coming in. Okay. If you want to put yourself off video until I introduce you, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, I'll do that, and then we'll do a big reveal. Okay, so I'll go off now.
Great. Right, good afternoon, everyone. I can see people are starting to come into the session. Thank you so much for joining on time. I hope you are all well today on this Wednesday lunchtime. I don't know about you, but I cannot believe it's Wednesday already. This week is going incredibly fast. Right, we've got 14. We're expecting about 30 people today. So we'll just give a little bit more time for people to come in because I know it's lunchtime and people might be grabbing a sandwich and everything else. Adam, thank you for introducing yourself. Please do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you wish. What you might want to do is just make sure that you're talking to everyone, not host and participants. There we go. But feel free to use the chat to comment, to ask questions, to introduce yourself. And we also have a Q&A facility, and you can ask questions in that as well. So really looking forward to today's session. Personally, I'm a huge fan of anything that's to do with company culture. So I'm very excited about learning a lot. We've got 20 people in, so I'll just give it another minute and continue to waffle at you. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous today because I am going to give blood for the first time this afternoon and I'm really squeamish. So I'm a bit like, oh gosh. Anyway, this session is being recorded. And you will get a copy of the recording after. Michelle's very kindly. Thank you, Adam. I will make sure I get some biscuits. And Michelle's very kindly said that we can share the recording with you, which is brilliant. So you will get a copy of it. Right, we've got some more people in. Welcome everyone that's just joined. My name's Esme. I am the alumni lead at Tech Nation. Not that really means anything because we're going out of business in a few weeks. But essentially, a big part of my role has been to put on sessions, masterclasses, peer-to-peer sessions like this one, to help our wonderful community, our alumni community, and other people in our Tech Nation community share their expertise and their knowledge, because it is a network full of amazing people with so much knowledge and so much expertise to share. As I said before, just in case you've just come in and missed it, please do feel free to use the chat to talk, to introduce yourself, to comment, to ask questions. We've also got a Q&A facility that you can use. The structure of today's session is Michelle will talk through some slides for about half an hour, and then we'll go into questions. We'll touch upon a couple that were submitted ahead of the session, and then please feel free to ask your questions and we'll work through them. So without any further ado, I will stop waffling now and introduce Michelle. Michelle, would you like to come on video? And I hope I just pronounced your name right.
Hello, how are you? It's Michael. You can call me Michael. I'll go by Michael.
Sorry, Michael, it's lovely to have you here. So it's a bit of a change of speaker this afternoon. We were expecting Dan, who's the co-founder of Your Flock, but we've got Michael, who is the MD and also the co-founder, with us today. Michael, I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself and kick this session off, and thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for inviting us. I'm super excited for the session. So yeah, my name is Michael. I'm the co-founder at Your Flock. So obviously I'm not Dan, however, Dan is my co-founder. So we got very similar experiences. We work with the same clients. So our presentation would have been very similar. So I'm super excited to talk about company culture. This is personal passion of mine, which you'll see in the presentation. So what I will do first, I will share the screen with you, and I hope that you can see it. And then do the slideshow. So what I want to talk to you about today is company culture, as the title for the presentation. But before we jump into the session, I would love to introduce you to who I am and what Your Flock really is. So YourFlock is an employee feedback platform. We effectively collect personalized feedback from employees based on their motivations and then give personalized tips to managers on how to best play to people's strengths and motivations. And so far, all companies that we work with 6 months or longer either maintain or improve their employee retention. So based on that data, we sort of identify different concepts you can invest in or implement within your business that we know will drive the positive result, like increasing employee retention or improving employee engagement. So as a quick introduction to YourFlock, we are a startup based in Manchester. We were the Rising Star finalist a few years ago. The entire concept of YourFlock is based on the University of Manchester research that I conducted a couple of years ago. And over the years, we went through a lot of pivots, which I won't get into. But we did win some innovative key funding. We developed machine learning on our platform. And also recently, we actually just launched YourFlock AI Coach that gives you instantaneous tips on how to best play to people's strengths and motivations or to improve your team engagement. So this is still not out in the wild. We are testing it with existing users, but stay tuned. And over the years, we have many great companies that we're very proud of. You can see on the screen different logos. So over the years, we work with hundreds of companies, thousands of users, and we sort of learned a few things. And I would love to share those things with you today. In terms of a quick introduction to myself, so I am Polish, and as I said to Esma before, I'm Polish and I am a bit ill. So that's not a great combination. If you can't understand me, just write in the comment and I'll repeat. A quick background story to who I am. I actually qualified to be a mechanical engineer. I got a dream job, joined the company, and it was completely different to what I expected. Not because of the job, but because of the company culture and the management style. And that sort of gave me a spark. So eventually I left that company, joined the University of Manchester, and then in there I conducted research on how do you quantify company culture, how can you use that in practice? And on the back of that research, we set up YourFlock. So that's who I am. I run YourFlock as a startup. And personally, unfortunately for you, I'm also a dad. And whenever I have a chance, I share a picture of my children. So I also run 2 other startups, one on the left called Rafał, and my newest startup on the right, Osian. He's only 4 weeks old. So if one of your feedbacks is that my face looks tired, it's because Osian hates to sleep. But anyway, I promise this is the last time I'm showing the pictures of my children. So let's get back to the presentation. So what I wanted to start with is really this. So there's over 150 different definitions of company culture, and they are all correct because culture is such a complex concept. You can look at it through the prism of core values or attitudes or behaviors or what you see in the office or online. So if you have 10 people, they will all have different definitions of company culture. So I know the title of this presentation is how do you make your scale up a place where you love to work. Just to manage your expectations, after this, you won't have a perfect recipe of how to make a culture where everyone loves to work. It's definitely a journey. This is like what you want to aim for. What you will get on the back of this presentation is a few concepts that we saw that provide value for companies across different industries that drive positive results like improved employee retention or improved employee engagement. And that's what I will share with you today. And this complexity again is reflected in our industry as well. You get hundreds of different HR tools because they all solve the concept of company culture in a different way. Okay, so before we talk about those concepts on how to improve your company culture, I think we need to take a founder approach. We really need to focus on what is the actual problem, how much this problem is worth, and then is it worth to solve it for us? Because when you look at it from the perspective of HR team is only cost for the business. So getting more costs to fix something that's not defined can be challenging. So that's why I decided to start with a problem. So when you spend some time doing research, you find a common theme. For example, you can find that 57% of employees who leave their jobs say that the relationship with the manager is one of the top reasons. Also, you can find that 70% of employee engagement scores that are directly related to either a manager or a boss. And there's lots of different pieces of knowledge that relate effectively to a fact that this relationship between employees and managers is significant. It's very important because it has an impact on how engaged people feel and how long they stay with your business. So, however, when you look at it from the perspective of managers, we found that 90% of managers actually admit that they don't have enough time to support their team members, to prioritize their work, to help them grow. And often that's the case, especially for scale-ups or growing companies, because client tasks take the priority, and often people tasks go to the bottom of the list. So managers simply don't have enough time. If you work remotely, that's magnified even more because you don't even see the people that you work with. Or sometimes you become a manager just because you're really good at your job. So you didn't have any training, you don't have any framework to support your employees. So effectively, that creates a situation where managers are responsible for engaging and retaining staff, but often they don't have enough time to do so. So that's really the challenge that we identified that has a significant impact on that, your company culture. So now the question is really, how much is this problem costing you? And again, there's lots of ways you can sort of quantify it. The way we selected to quantify it is by looking at employee turnover. So if people leave your business, it will eventually cost your business due to lost productivity, recruitment fees, and so on. So, however, when you look on and Google, how much does employee turnover cost me, you find a lot of different studies that claim that it will cost you from between 20% or 400% of employees' salary. So that's not really that useful because which one is correct. So we took some time actually within your flock, and we looked at the useful research, and we created a tool that helps you to calculate the cost of your employee turnover. And the research that we used was conducted by Oxford Economics, and this is one of the graphs from that research. So I know it looks quite complicated, so let me explain it to you. So the concept behind that research is very simple. It purely looks at time lost. Let's say you have a team of 5 people and one person leaves. Then it usually takes you a few weeks to rehire, let's say 10 weeks. So during those 10 weeks, all those team members will have a lower productivity because they will need to pick up the slack. Then once you recruit somebody new, it will take them a couple of weeks, let's say 20 weeks, to reach full productivity. So then you lose those weeks as well. So then at the end of the rehiring process, you lost 10 weeks for rehire, 20 weeks to reach full productivity. So in total, you lost 30 weeks of time. And then that time can be accommodated to a salary. So that's why we created a quick tool that effectively takes all this logic and data from that research, and then I can share it with you after the presentation actually. And just by putting your data, you can estimate how much your employee turnover is costing you right now. So let me just quickly show you how it works. So I can put my name and my email. Let's say my company's 10, there's 10 people, and for the sake of this experiment, let's say that one person left. So then we can estimate the cost of one person leaving within our business. Let's say we work in technology, and in my team it's 10 as well. And then average salary is between 30 and 40,000 pounds. And now based on that, using the research from Oxford Economics, we can calculate that, boom, how much money one employee leaving us is costing us is around 14,000 pounds a year. And that's not actually money going out of your bank account. It's just purely the time, the days lost or weeks lost. So I think, it's very important to do that exercise to estimate how much money this employee turnover is costing you right now. Because if you're a team of, let's say, 6 people or 10 people and nobody has left you over the past year, then, I would argue that perhaps this is not your priority right now. You can sort it out at the later stage. However, if you are at 10 and you're looking to double in size over the next year, perhaps there could be some cost savings along the way that you can implement. So then it is worth considering. But the reason why I presented it is really because of the feedback that we received before people signed up. And there was lots of questions on how do you get the buy-in from the leadership? How do you justify the cost of a tool? And that's basically it. HR teams are just costs for the finance team. So they need to work extra hard to justify why you want to spend more money. And I think this is a great way to estimate how much money the business is losing right now and what projects you want to implement to minimize that cost. And hopefully that's useful. Okay, so now we established what the problem is: employee-manager relationship, huge impact on employee turnover. We know how much money it can cost your business. So now, how can we create a productive culture where this relationship is great? And you do a little bit of research and you found that employee engagement is written all over the Google if you ask that question. So if you create an engaged culture where employees are more engaged, people will be more productive, they'll be happier, they'll stay with you for longer. That's a great quote from Henry Mitzberg. Gallup did a great study where they found that highly engaged teams are 21% more profitable. This is what you want to see within your business. There's also other research papers that say more engaged teams got better reputation, and more engaged teams produce less errors, so the quality of output improves, and also they tend to have better client satisfaction ratings. So you really want to raise that employee engagement to improve that relationship. So the question is, how do we do it? But before we get into how do we do it, let's have a look at the current state across the globe. So I've got a question for you in here, which is, what do you think is the percentage of engaged employees across the globe? So this is a research conducted by Gallup across over 100,000 different employees. And they effectively check what's the percentage of employees that are engaged, not engaged, or actively disengaged. So do you want to write in the chat, what do you think is the percentage of the engaged workforce? I can see Adam put 62. Any other takers? 30, 45, less than 40. Any other takers? 30. All right, 20, 40 is going down. 20%. See, that's closer. Okay. So the answer is 20%. So people tend to think it's higher, but for me, it's mind-blowing, because you look at the actively disengaged employees, and there's actually more actively disengaged employees than engaged employees across the globe. So I think what it's highlighting is that it's a difficult problem that hasn't been solved yet across the globe. So all companies everywhere are struggling to find employees that love where they work. And as we stand right now, there's more people that hate what they do than love what they do. But the positive sign is that when I checked this research, 3 or 4 years ago, the engaged percentage was around 11%. So it more than almost doubled in size. So I think we're moving in the right direction. But again, what it's showing is that it's a difficult problem. You don't have a quick solution to solve it. It will take time to improve it. Okay, so how do we improve employee engagement? That's a massive question. And if we had a week to discuss it, we probably still wouldn't be able to cover everything. Because if you think about it, you can buy fruit in the office. You can take people for a beer after work. You can give somebody praise. That all has an impact on employee engagement. So I won't be able to cover all of those concepts because we don't have enough time. So what I've decided is I'll share with you 3 different, let's call them pillars, that we found that when companies implement them, we saw that based on data, they either maintain or improve their employee retention. Those concepts are quite simple, and I think you can, some of them you can even implement more. And they are them. So it's motivation, feedback, and praise. So what I'll do over the next how many minutes? I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I'll go through those concepts and explain what I mean by them. And your flock is built around those concepts, and that's how we sort of provide value to clients. But you can implement those concepts yourself as well. So let's start with motivation. So motivation, I think, is the most important of all of them because it creates the base for everything else that you do. So motivation really determines how each one of us behaves, or how we feel. What excites you, what frustrates you, what makes you happy. It's all predetermined by your motivations. And it's easily comparable with company culture. So when you look at company culture, at the core, you've got your core values. Those are the guiding rules that determine how the company behaves, how you deal with failure, how do you decide to grow, what policies you build. So, the research shows that companies with defined core values are more successful than their competitors. It's the same with individuals. Once you have your individual values defined, you know them across the team, you then become more successful as well. And once you have those motivations defined, you know what drives each one of your colleagues, you can then start personalizing the entire experience to each one of your colleagues or employees. If you know that I am motivated by, let's say, autonomy, you'll completely change the way you work with me. You will not micromanage me because you know that it will demotivate me and I might leave if you micromanage me for a long time. So that creates this base. Once you know the motivations across your team, you can then do everything in a personalized way. And the more personalized you become, the more impact it will have. Another thing we all suffer from is a fancy term called false consensus effect, which is a fancy word for bias, which effectively says that we all assume that everyone's motivated by the same thing as we are. And there's lots of research that sort of confirms it. And the reality is that it's not the case. You got most likely a diverse team motivated by different things. So it's very difficult, very important to define it. One of the main sort of assumptions is that the thing that motivates people the most is money. And there's a great experiment that explores it. You might have heard of it. It was conducted by Dan Pink and other scientists. So Dan Pink is a great HR consultant. He wrote a book. He's got a great TED Talk. I definitely recommend looking into this guy. But he did a very interesting experiment, which was effectively building those cubes, the puzzles that you can see on the right. So the experiment was they took two groups of people and they asked them to complete as many of those puzzles as possible. One group number one, was given high financial rewards for every successful assembly of a puzzle. The second group was given no financial rewards or very low financial reward for completing those puzzles. So that's another question for you. Which group do you think performed best? Which group produced the most puzzles? Was it group number one with high financial rewards or group number two? You can see group number twos. Any more takers? Group number two? Well, you can probably get it from the tone of this presentation that it is a group number two. So, but let's the group number two was more productive, which I think is mind-blowing. It goes against anything I've learned at school. Because if you think about it, if you have a team and you want them to be more productive, if you give them all a raise, and according to this theory, they'll become less productive. And of course, I'm not telling anyone to not give raise. I think this is just one experiment. And also, the way experiment was conducted is they purely looked at financial rewards. I think there's a balance to be struck between financial reward and intrinsic drive reward. But effectively, what this experiment is saying is that if you align a creative task, with intrinsic motivation or intrinsic drive, as Dan Pink calls it, then people will become much more productive. So rather than just giving somebody a 50 quid Amazon voucher for their performance, you can actually align it with their motivation. So once you know that somebody is motivated by, let's say, personal growth, and you tell them how a specific task will help them grow, they'll be way more productive than if you told them that they will get a 50 quid Amazon voucher. So that's the impact of it, and there's some research that supports it. So now the question is, how can we use it at work? And this is how I would recommend using it. So first you need to define it, and there's different ways you can define it. You can do psychometric tests. I think with psychometric tests, you need to look into psychometric tests that actually measure values, drivers, or motivations. If you do a personality test, it will tell you whether you're extroverted or introverted, but it won't really explore what motivates you. So I would recommend these. Or you can just do it through face-to-face. If you've got a small team of, let's say, 6 people, you probably know what people are driven by. So just write it down. And then the second step is to share it. So, this is what we do at your Flock. Once we do this initial assessment of how different people are, we encourage to discuss those profiles. And often, you find new things about people in your team, especially when you work remotely and somebody new join your team works remotely, you don't really know what drives them. By having those chats, you can adapt the way you work with them, play more to their strengths, motivations, and then they'll engage more and they'll stay with you for longer. And then the last thing is you need to use it. So how many of you had a psychometric test done? You got a 100-page report, you looked at it once, and then you put it in your drawer, and then you never look at it again. I've done it definitely, and it cannot be done that way. So and you need to create some sort of routine, some sort of activities within your business that are recurring, that strengthen the concept that motivations are important. And those could be, simple things like, for example, you collect feedback based on motivations, or you do shout outs. What did you do over the past month that aligned with your motivations? Or do some sort of quiz, who's motivated by what? Anything that you do, it can be a very simple thing, but you need to have those recurring routines to strengthen it. And that's not something that I came up with. This is something that I've saw with the companies that we work with. And here's an example. So this is what we do at Your Flock. So we've got, I'm not going to get into too much details in this, but effectively, whenever you sign up, you do a 5-minute survey and we define your profile. And you've got those 9 different motivations in here that we measure. And then you can see how my profile, the blue one, fits against the team, which is the red one. And then you can use it. So for example, as a manager, if a manager was speaking with me, they can ask, what can I do more of to play to your strengths? What can you do more of to play to minimize the differences? Like, as you can see, my recognition value is at 0, which is a horrible attribute to have as a team leader, because if it was up to me, I wouldn't recognize anyone for anything. It just doesn't come naturally to me. But I know that this can lead to conflict. So I commit myself to recognizing and praising people every week to make sure it doesn't lead to any miscommunication or a misunderstanding. But also, I know that I'm much more driven by adaptability, customer focus. So I need to put myself on client-facing projects. I need to be able to experiment at work, because then I know that I'll feel more engaged. So I think that's very powerful. Once you have it set, that can then feed all the different, all other initiatives you take across the company. So that's motivation. Number 2 is feedback. So feedback, again, very complicated. You can do 360 feedback, annual, quarterly, weekly, monthly. So I won't discuss all of this. But out of interest, what sort of feedback surveys do you use? Do you want to put in your chat? Is it annual, quarterly, weekly, monthly, or all of them? I just want to gauge the room. Quarterly, none, mixture, false. Okay, so it looks like there is a mix. I think from what I've mixture, yeah, 6 months. So what I've learned over the years is that annual and quarterly surveys are great tools for HR teams, because you get a lot of information, you can identify new initiatives to take across different teams to improve engagement, and you can also use it to report to leadership, to say how engagement changes. I found that weekly and monthly surveys are much well fit to managers. We know that managers are super busy, so hopefully the tools that you have collect little bits of information and give managers snippets of information, like 1 action point or 2 action points that can act on in real time and make sure that all the problems are being solved in real time as well. So because the problem we identified before is around this manager-employee relationship, I'll focus on weekly, monthly surveys. So the main question is really, how do we collect feedback effectively? And again, this is based on the experience we had with other companies. The most important thing is that you action feedback quickly, especially when you get it on a weekly or monthly basis. Because if you get feedback this week, you don't act on it, and nobody will respond the following week, because there's no action being taken. So we found that this is the single most significant factor that impacts response rate. Second thing, share what actions you've taken. So sometimes people do something on the back of feedback that they don't share it with the team, so that the team doesn't know that it happened. And then again, that has an impact on employee response rate. So sharing the feedback, almost as important as acting on it. And then the third one is personalize the questions you ask. So if you know that I am motivated by, let's say, autonomy, you can ask me whether I was micromanaged over the past month. And if I was, then you know that it will have a huge impact on the way I feel. So if you can personalize those questions, do it because you'll get more valuable insight. And then the last thing is what I've seen few companies do is that they introduce the model, because sometimes people provide feedback in a way, you do a great job, which is not really constructive. But once you introduce a model like SBI, then it gives you a framework. So you first, let's say, describe a situation, specific situation, what behavior a person did, and then what impact it had on you or on the team. So that helps, the person that gets the feedback to improve and to do more of it. So it's definitely useful. So in the way, how do you implement it at work? Well, first, introduce it, share the best feedback practices. As I said before, share it, share the action that you took, share the positive comments that have been shared, so people know that you actually use it and there's action being taken on the back of it. And then again, use it is the most important part. You need to create routines that you collect feedback, let's say on the last Friday of the month, or Thursday of the month, or every 2 weeks. You need to pick a time to do it. And then also you need to allocate time for managers to read it, to use it in meetings. If it's not in place, then it will not be used. That's what we found so far from our clients. We do help to tap into the routines they already have to make sure it works. And here's an example. So this is one of the reports we produce. And at the bottom in here, this is your action plan for the manager. So you got a few actions at the bottom in here. For example, I can see that I need to speak with Cassidy. She's driven by collaboration, and I need to organize a quick catch-up of her support. With Joshua, I know he's driven by customer focus. All I need to do is to share some positive client feedback with him. And I know because it aligns with their motivations, they'll feel more engaged. So hopefully whatever you use can give you those action plans as well. And then the last one is praise. So praise, I think, is my favorite, even though my recognition value is at 0, because I think one of the questions before this is how can we have a positive impact without spending too much money? Well, praise is your answer, because when you look at science behind praise, it's mind-blowing. 83% of employees said that the recognition for the contribution was more fulfilling than rewards or gifts. Again, we can either give 50 quid Amazon voucher, or you can actually genuinely tell people why they did well. And Gallup study said that just by giving regular praise, you can improve your productivity by 10 to 20%, which is, in terms of the time commitment, you literally spend 2 minutes every week to give praise to somebody, and you can see 10 to 20% productivity increase. I'm not sure how they calculated it. I assume it's through days like we did, like absenteeism. But the stats are crazy on the praise. And there's also prominent figures that recognize it as well, like Richard Branson. Praise can turn a bad day into good day into great day. COO at Facebook, that's all she's saying. It doesn't need to be expensive, it needs to be genuine. And again, if you align it with motivations, it'll have even bigger impact. So if you know that somebody's motivated by teamwork, if you tell them how well they did with contributing to team performance, amazing. If they are customer focused, if you tell them how well they did with providing value for clients, amazing again. So praise, the simplest tool you can implement with a massive impact. And how do you use it at work? Well, let everyone know why praise is important. Share success stories, not only within your team, but across the company, and then use it. So we've got one of the great clients we worked with called Talent Crowd. They grew from like 5 people to 25 people in 1 year, and they had a great routine. They had weekly wins. They had something called shout outs, I think, where they would every week, every employee can give a shout out to somebody else for the great work that they did. And it takes 30 seconds to create a shout out, and a massive impact on team morale, engagement, and so on. And you can pick your own thing as well, but usually it doesn't cost you anything. It's just time. And here's an example of how we do it. So at the bottom of our reports, people can provide comments on how success stories they can share it across the team, so everyone is up to date with all the success stories happening in the team. We also do monthly reports where we recognize who provided the most feedback, who's the feedback king or feedback queen, who improved the most. So at the top right corner, you can see again, you can use that to recognize others as well. And those are the 3 main concepts that we build your flock around, and we've seen that if companies implement it, it has a positive impact on employee retention and overall on employee engagement as well. So in terms of the implementation, let me just check the time. I think we're good on time. Implementation is, I don't think finding the tool will be a challenge for you. There's hundreds of different HR tools available. I think the biggest challenge is how to use that tool so it becomes the inherent part of how you operate. This tool needs to be part of what you do on a weekly, monthly, and annual basis. So, whenever you pick your tool, it's important so that, the whoever gives you that tool understands how you operate. Is there any new routines you need to create to make sure you get the most out of the tool that you use? There's one question on the sign up, which was, how do you get buy-in from leadership? And I think it's an important one. So because the employee engagement needs to be led from the top, company culture needs to be led from the top. If you don't have that leadership buy-in, it will never work. So the way we've seen companies get that buy-in is first to quantify the problem. This is something that we discussed at the start. How much is the problem currently costing us? So already covered it. What I saw was the most successful for companies is just by focusing on one thing. Because again, company culture, employee engagement, you can pick a lot of different metrics you want to improve. But I saw that companies that were the most successful just picked one. Like, for example, how proud employees are of working in your company. We want to improve this. And then all the projects that you do, just subscribe to the improvement of this one metric. And then it makes it simpler. It's this founder sort of approach into improving things. If you just focus on improving one thing, and not in 1 month, it's usually in 1 year, you just want to improve one metric. And next year you can focus on another one. And that makes it simple. And then again, providing resources and training for managers is really useful. Often managers are not trained, they're super busy, they don't have time to onboard those new tools, new routines. So the more help you provide to managers, the easier the implementation will be. Okay, and then just to summarize, as I said, there's different ways you can improve employee engagement. You can buy more fruit, you can organize some events with employees. It all has an impact on employee engagement. We found, based on where we have that motivation, feedback, and praise can have that positive impact. That's why I decided to share it with you. Some of them are very simple, like providing praise. You can literally start doing it from tomorrow. There's some more complex. If you've got a bigger company, feedback can be difficult to collect, so you probably need some tools. But I hope that you find those 3 concepts useful. But I think that's the end of the
Hi everyone. I hope you're all still with us. I'm really sorry, we seem to have lost Michael. I'm hoping he'll come back in and join us. This has never happened before. Oh, here he is. He's back. Michael, we lost you for a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. I came to the office to make sure I've got good internet, and it just cut off. So I'm.
Thank you for persevering and coming back in. I'll hand back over to you.
Yeah. So where did you lose me? Sorry. Well, at what point?
I was too busy panicking to actually remember, because I thought the session was. Could someone pop in the chat where we lost Michael, please? Thank you. Literally at the end. Yeah, there we go.
Literally at the end. Okay, yeah. So I mean, so all I was saying at the end is that there's different ways you can improve employee engagement. So don't tell my word for granted. There will be different ways you can explore as well. We know that those things work for us, and we see some data that supports the case for them. So that's why I share them. And have you got any questions? I know we've got some questions pre-prepared, right, from people who signed up, so we can kick off with these. Over the past 2 minutes, I was speaking to myself and nobody was speaking back, and I was wondering Am I saying something wrong? That was just my internet.
Don't worry. We've all been there. So should we go to the question sheet, Michael? And if anyone has any questions they would like to ask, please do either pop them in the chat or pop them in the Q&A, and we'll come back to them very shortly. But there was a couple that I know that you wanted to pick up on because they weren't directly in your presentation today. So the first one, Michael, that I'm going to ask you is, what creative ways are there to keep employees engaged through uncertainty?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think we had lots of those questions during COVID, right? Because there was lots of uncertainty. And there's actually a very cool experiment conducted by neuroscientists. They examined different emotions and how much anxiety they built. And what they found is actually uncertainty produces the most anxiety out of all different emotions. So it's the anticipation of bad results that produces the most anxiety for some reason. So it's, if you want your team to be retained and to stay engaged, you really need to minimize that uncertainty as much as you can. And over COVID, we produced this guide, which effectively has 3 steps. And during uncertainty, you can't really know for sure what's going to happen next, but the way you deal with it you can definitely control. So we usually provide like 3-point plan, which is around speed, simplicity, and transparency. So if you find out something new, make sure that you let people know straight away. Otherwise, they'll feel more uncertain, right? So the speed of communication is very important. Simplicity is super important as well. So avoid speculation or lengthy messages, because that will overwhelm people, produce even more uncertainty. So just simplicity of what's happening, stick to the facts is very important. And then transparency. So let people know that you don't really know what's happening. Make sure you avoid any panic, and don't be afraid to communicate, bad news as well.
Great, thank you, Michael. The next question that we had in ahead of the session, and again, I think this is probably something that a lot of people will be interested in the answer to. How do you maintain work-life balance and prevent burnout, both in yourself as a founder or a leader, and also how do you support the same in the team?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, right? And I think it's especially tough when you work remotely. When you work from home, you don't have your office, so your house is your office. So when do you finish? And I think I've seen, so that's what we implemented, and we learned it from one of our clients. And what they did is a concept called successful day at work. So effectively, at the start of the day, you say, this is what I need to do today. And once I've achieved it, I had a successful day at work. So then towards the end of the day, they just ask, have you had a successful day at work? And if you have, stop working. Don't do anything for tomorrow, because then you'll burn out. So that's, one of the simple sort of activities you can take, I guess. But making sure that, I think coming back to the presentation, making sure that you know what people are motivated by. Some people might be motivated by this work-life balance, or they have their families. I have a child that's 4 weeks old now, so I get additional stress. So just being aware of what's happening in the team is very useful as well.
Great, thank you. Some really nice sort of feedback, and a question from Adrian Land, saying, yeah, I guess it is a balancing act. From personal experience, just talking about feedback, when a company asks you for your feedback too much, it can be annoying, and constantly asking for feelings, inner thoughts can be seen as invasive. So I guess the question is, any experience on how to judge the depth and frequency of asking?
Yeah. So for us, it's a key for us, because if our tool is annoying for users, then we're going to lose a client. So we've explored it quite a lot. So we definitely tested the frequency. We started with 1 every week, and that's definitely too annoying. We found that on average, people like to take surveys every 2 weeks. Some of them go every month, depending, I guess, on your industry and whether you work remotely or not. So I think if you work remotely, you don't really have access to as much access to how others feel as you would have in the office. So we found that companies that are more remote take the feedback more frequently. I think the key in this is not to ask 10-minute surveys. It should be like tops 5 questions or 6 questions. So in terms of your time commitment, it's 1 minute. It can't be more than 1 minute because then it becomes more annoying as well. So with frequency, I guess you need to decide it with your team what's the best frequency. And then in terms of the depth, I think it comes back to the presentation, which is you need to make sure that based on that feedback, you take action on the back of it. Because if you're just asking for the sake of asking and then the team doesn't see anything changing, then why would you, provide that feedback? So I think you need to make sure that you take action on the back of it. And the last thing that I wanted to say is that we assume, some people say, oh, I don't want to provide feedback because I feel fine. So, I don't want to provide it, but this is just you. There are other people in the team that might want to provide that feedback. So you can't assume that everyone, feels the same as you do.
Great. So another nice comment that's come through, and I'll read it out loud because it was only sent to us, Michael. Thank you, James G. Seeking feedback is great, but ultimately, is the executive ever going to act upon the employee's evidence presented to the company? So what's your thoughts on kind of executive response to feedback?
Yeah, so it sounds pretty personal. So yes, so I mean that comes back into if you provide feedback and no action is being taken, then why are you collecting that feedback in the first place? I think so. I think that's sort of the management. It's as mentioned, it's the management issue. If the management just did it as a tick box, I think over time the response rate will go down to 0 because no action is being taken. And I think who do you raise it with? I think you raise it with the manager, because if you raise it with the HR team, then they'll raise it with the manager anyway. So go directly to the manager and ask if what actions have been taken. We try to do it as a company as well. We communicate with managers and tell them what actions they should take and and so on. But ultimately, it's down to the manager to take that action.
Great, thank you. Has anyone got any more questions that they'd like to ask today? We do have time. And thank you, Marek, for your comments on it depends on the company culture. I'd like to think most do act on it. Please do ask some more questions if you have them, because like I said, we have got some time with Michael today to continue to tap into his expertise. Please don't be shy, and you can submit anonymously, I think, if you is there any more of the pre-submitted questions, Michael, that you think might be interesting to cover? I know that there was quite a lot of stuff in around, I know you've covered a bit of it, but I know there's quite a bit of stuff to do with actually how to keep your scale up engaged when going through necessary changes, understanding more around the subtle things a company can do to ensure it maintains a great culture during change. Given that one of the nature of scale ups is that they are constantly changing, particularly as they grow. What's your thoughts on kind of keeping people engaged as change happens, as growth happens?
So we work with a few companies that are scale ups right now, and one of the companies, I hope they don't, I'm not going to mention their name, I don't know if they're okay with it, but effectively they recognize they're about to scale up and recruit a lot of new people in. And as you do that, you have less and less time. So you get new people in, and then you won't really have as much time as you would have with your original employees. So what we did with them, they implemented a lot of routines and automated them, so that became a little bit more mature, a little bit more, let's say it, bureaucratic. So they had some processes in place, especially around recruitment, right? Because if you recruit somebody new and they are bad fit, then that's, as you scale, that has a huge impact on the way you work. So I think recruitment, which I didn't cover today, is the first thing you should look into. How do you recruit the right people in? And I think looking at those motivations, or how people behave, is a great place to start. Who do you want to in your business? So once you create those processes, then you can just, as grow quickly, just tap into those already existing routines. And I think that avoids having bad hires or making as many mistakes. Of course, you will make mistakes, right? But hopefully you'll learn from them quickly.
Thank you. And we've got an anonymous question that's come in. Do you find differences in engagement to these types of processes and the type of feedback by age, by sex or gender, between office and remote, between early stage employees and mainstream employees?
Do you find differences in engagement type and processes? Yeah, so we don't really look into different sex, gender, or age. I've got some. We don't have a lot of data that we don't have data that's we use to analyze the age and sex changes. I do have some stories from different users that that, for example, remote teams engage with the tool more, because it makes sense, because they may feel isolated or lonely, and especially when you're busy, you don't necessarily have time to raise it with your manager, so you use the tool to communicate with your manager when you work remotely. We definitely found that early stage employees engage with it more, because it's an opportunity for them to get to know the culture and provide feedback to their managers and get to know others more as well. But to answer, yeah, sadly, we don't really cover the data on age and sex because of diversity rules and whatnot.
Great, thank you, Michael. And we've had a question come in, and this is definitely something I've noticed because Technation has been remote first ever since, well, COVID happened. And the question that's come in, the question I have is, I have found that post-COVID and working from home, some people who used to be super involved in the business, i.e. coming into the office, going to socials, joining different activities, are just not doing it anymore. We see most of the things that were covered in the presentation today, but they're still isolated at home. Some people I haven't seen in 6 months in person. Am I just assuming they could be unhappy, or should we try and engage them in some way? Any tips on how to engage them?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think first of all, it comes back to what motivates people. So for example, my team, you can see I'm quite teamwork driven. I love collaboration. If I don't speak with people, I'll go crazy at home. So I need to make sure that I do have that contact, and I do go to the office like today. Whereas Dan, my co-founder, his teamwork is almost zero. So if it was up to him, he would just sit on his own at home and he'll be happily working remotely forever. So I think it comes back to what people are driven by. I think what we've seen is that over COVID, people's motivations actually changed. We've seen a huge shift for people to be more driven by personal growth. So for some reason, after COVID, everyone wants to learn now. So in your example, some people who liked socials, like different activities, could have changed. Maybe they got different priorities and they prefer to stay at home. So if you haven't seen them for 6 months and they used to do that, perhaps have a chat with them to find out if they are unhappy. But I'm just looking at myself. Over COVID, I had a baby. I used to be this person going to the office constantly and going to events constantly. Now after COVID, I don't do it as often. I still do it sometimes, but it doesn't mean I'm unhappy. I just changed the way I operate, I guess. And I think COVID had that impact on many people, because you basically discovered a new way of working.
That's great, thank you. Is there any final questions from anybody? Give you a few seconds. Okay, so I will share the recording of this session after, and I don't think there's anything wrong with finishing 7 minutes early when I know everyone is very busy. Michael, thank you so much for today and for just sharing so much wisdom and expertise with us. Just to wrap up, are there any final kind of tips or words of advice you'd like to share with our attendees on how to make your scale up somewhere people love to work?
Well, so I think the easiest thing you can do is the last thing that I mentioned, actually, which is praise. I know that some people already said that they already do it, but praise is the cheapest way to boost your performance by up to 20%. And all you need to do is well done on the work that you've done. I think that's the easiest thing you can implement. If you've got more time, focus on values, personalize the experience as much as you can, and make sure that people do change their motivation. So constantly check on it. That's my advice, I guess.
That's brilliant. What a great way to end. Michael, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your time this afternoon. And I will share the recording in due course as soon as it comes through. Have a great rest of day, everybody. And Michael, thank you again. Take care.
Thank you for inviting me as well, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.